We're back. We were gone, but now we have returned. Charlie bit my finger. DarkSide in the People's Court. Big Sur. TrendMicro. Russian keyboards to fool Russians. And Fleming Shi from Barracuda on this edition of Security Weekly News.
This is Security Weekly. For security professionals, by security professionals.
We interrupt our program to bring you this important message.
It's the show that keeps you up to date on the latest security news twice a week. Your trusted source for accurate security information and expert analysis. It's time for Security Weekly News. As technology continues to evolve and expand, so have the attackers that put our critical systems in jeopardy. Core Impact from Core Security is a penetration testing tool that safely finds vulnerabilities using the same techniques of adversaries, with certified exploits and wizards that guide you through critical pen tests while maximizing the time of advanced testers by automating their routines. With Core Security, you can safeguard your infrastructure by limiting access, detecting threats, testing for security weaknesses, and efficiently monitoring data. Visit securityweekly.com/core security.
It is the week of 23 May, and we have returned from RSA. I hope you caught all those shows last week, including great Paul's Security Weekly on Thursday night. Let's get to the news. Well, since we've been gone, we basically just sit around and drink tequila and play acoustic guitar, or maybe that was Jimmy Buffett. I get me and Jimmy Buffett confused all the time, but either way, we are back. In this first story, apparently, DarkSide, the ransomware as a service group that conducted, or at least hosted, the Colonial Pipeline attack, which was all the rage when we left. So when RSA started, it was like all Colonial this, Colonial that, Colonial Pipeline, DarkSide. It was all we got. But when we come back, it's still going on. So the attack was so high profile. So this attack on Colonial Pipeline was so high profile that they became a major focus of just about everybody, from fighting Joe Biden, the president of the United States, to, me. So everybody. I mean, that's. I'll just leave it at that. You can fill in all the other names between Joe Biden and me, so that's sort of the top to bottom and everybody else. But apparently this resulted in their operations getting interrupted on Friday, which led for calls for DarkSide to speak, according to their charter, honestly and openly about problems, as they had promised that they would, and they had posts. So they did. They posted a lot of their servers that they use for blogging, payment processing, denial of service, ransomwaring. All these little functions of this business had been seized. Now, they didn't say where the servers were or who seized them, but they were apparently seized. So, as you might guess, having all your servers grabbed puts a real crimp in your ransomwaring. I mean, it's really tough to ransomware people when you can't send, process the payment, send out the nasty letters and all that kind of stuff. So as a result, they were having a tough time collecting ransoms, and they were not delivering on promises they had made to affiliates to, I guess, deliver ransoms. So the story that I had was they turned the dispute over to a kind of, as they called it, People's Court, which was made up of admins of the Dark Web Criminal Forum. So I guess this is like the meeting of the five families in Brooklyn or something, like the mafia dons all get together and they decide if Michael can whack Fredo and all this kind of stuff, I guess. I don't know that much about the mafia. But anyway, complaints are being submitted to the forum. So for DarkSide, who's breaking the terms of its affiliate program. Wait, they have an affiliate program? I mean, so it's like we're an evil ransomware company. We have an affiliate program. It's like the next thing that's coming from them will be like the DarkSide Company picnic, the group photo, the egg race, all that good stuff. It'll be like, hi, I'm Dr. Doug White. You may know me from such hit web shows as Paul's Security Weekly, What's That in My Pocket? Or I Wouldn't Eat That If I Were You. Or Here, Hold This, all my other shows. But in real life, I will be your host for your first day here at DarkSide, where we really care about our employees. Anyway, the hackers court uses fancy legal terms like plaintiff and defendants, according to Huntress researcher John Hammond. I don't know what happens if you cross the court orders or the court orders you to do something, or who's actually in charge, or maybe it's like the mafia and they just take you down to Jersey and they dump you in the Pine Barrens. I mean, and again, all I know about the mafia in Jersey is what I learned watching The Sopranos, so it's probably not very accurate. But anyway, it's an interesting story that you probably should read. As you can see, I was quite amused by it. So Apple patched macOS to remove a vulnerability that was being exploited by XCSset spyware. I actually managed to say that. There was a hole that allowed XCSset, and I don't know how to say it. Maybe I'm saying it wrong, and it's something really cool sounding, but I'm just saying XCSset, so if it's something else, I'll let you worry about it. But this malware was capturing screenshots of the system that were running the 11.4 version of the OS called Big Sur. And so XCSset was discovered by TrendMicro last August, and at that time they saw it using 2 zero-day flaws to operate. But a new flaw, or one of those flaws was the data vault, which allowed a bypass of the system integrity protection component of the operating system. And another one was in Safari WebKit development that allowed cross-site scripting. So, put those two things together, and it's kind of bad. The third zero-day flaw was found by Jamf, and they said it was an AppleScript module was being used to capture the actual screenshot from a list of installed apps. So certain things that are running, they could capture the screen while it was going. So, patch your Mac. They did release a patch for this, so, take care of that. RSA was last week, and one story that came out of it that I liked, was interested in, was that Cobalt Strike has replaced Metasploit as the preferred hacking platform in this study. Cobalt Strike was originally built by Raphael Mudge back in 2012, but it remained a kind of second or maybe even third fiddle to Metasploit and others for a long time. Even though it was out there, it was a lot of people liked it, but it was not the thing. Help Systems bought Cobalt Strike last year. Sophos, who did the report, released data about attacker behavior for the year and showed that Cobalt Strike is one of the top 5 attack tools currently being used and is a key component for building PowerShell commands to obfuscate your activity. If you haven't used Cobalt Strike, you probably should check it out. They did find that 60% of PowerShell exploits did use Cobalt Strike and components of Cobalt Strike, and they also indicated that it's commonly paired with PS exec in a third of other attacks. All this was found in the Active Adversary Playbook for 2021 from Sophos. Like Metasploit, the product is intended for red teaming, but it's often used for, other things. So if you look at malware frameworks, you'll often see Cobalt Strike being included as a component of those malware frameworks to allow other things. Cisco's Talos reported vulnerabilities in TrendMicro's home network security devices, which could be used to escalate privilege or just to create an arbitrary login. The devices contained 3 key vulnerabilities, which consisted of 2 stack buffer overflows and, wait for it, a hard-coded password. You'd think in this day and age that wouldn't be happening, but it's still happening. The 2 main vulnerabilities are in the IO control module, and they can be exploited with specially crafted IO control requests that it does require you to be able to execute code on the device. So it's probably not a massive threat, but it is a threat. And then, of course, there's a hard-coded password. So, hard-coded. I can't say that enough. TrendMicro said it had no knowledge of any actual attacks due to the vulnerability, but has released firmware updates which should be automatically put in place through their firmware update process on the device. But, you might want to check that and see. In the bigger world of maybe try this at home, this doesn't sound too dangerous, and it was actually sounded pretty interesting. So Krebs was talking about this, and they found a Twitter discussion last week, which was basically about ransomware kill switches. There obviously have been famous versions of this in history, like, say, WannaCry. So WannaCry, if you don't recall, was a few years ago, had a kill switch. It had to connect to a domain that if the domain was out there, or if it could, I don't remember if it was it had to be there, or if it couldn't connect. I think it was it had to find the domain. It wouldn't run. And so the idea, of course, was that probably the people that developed WannaCry didn't want to, allow it to spread just everywhere so they could stop it or start it whenever they wanted to. But this idea was much, much simpler than that. The discussion that was going on found that a great deal of ransomware would not install on a Windows machine that had certain virtual keyboards installed. If you don't know what that means, a virtual keyboard is this almost useless tool. It's very difficult to use virtual keyboards because you have to click the keys with a mouse and so forth. But it basically allows you to type alternate alphabets. So if you are working in Greek or Russian or some language that uses a different alphabet, you can install a virtual keyboard. Now, it is kind of useful if you just need to do a few small things, like, say, Cyrillic on your computer, and you want to do it really, really slowly with the mouse, then this is the way to go. So this article is about how groups like DarkSide don't want to be charged in their home countries, which in the case of Russia requires a complaint to be filed from within Russia. So you can do whatever you want as long as you don't do it in Russia. And so Cyberreason had checked this out. So they tested this. And what they did was they checked this against a hard-coded do not install list for DarkSide. And they found Russian and other Cyrillic languages were excluded, along with Arabic and a whole bunch of others. Now, this is not to say this is going to solve a ransomware problem, because once the ransomware people figure that people are installing virtual keyboards to prevent ransomware, guess what? They will update their ransomware, and their automatic ransomware botnet upgrade engine will simply update all the engines, and it will go away. And and there was a quote from our friend Allison Nixon on just that topic in the article, so you can check that out. Now, I have had a Russian keyboard on my machine for years because I was going to Russia, and I actually needed a Cyrillic keyboard so I could type some stuff in to this application I had to fill out, and I've never been ransomwared. Now, this, of course, is called a fallacy of causality by academics. Just saying. But, anyway, it all sounded kind of funny. It was a really good article. It was quite interesting. I thought it was going to be kind of a joke story, but, it actually came out. When we return, Fleming Shi from Barracuda is going to join us to talk about supply chain and other matters. So stick around.
Cybercriminals are working overtime. They're leveraging activity around the COVID vaccine to disguise phishing attacks, hoping to steal money or personal information from your employees or customers. The Barracuda Email Threat Scanner is a free tool you can use right now to help protect your business and ultimately your reputation. The Barracuda Email Threat Scanner analyzes your Office 365 accounts and identifies malicious emails that slipped past your gateway and into inboxes. Find the cybersecurity threats hiding in your Office 365 email. Use the Barracuda Email Threat Scanner for free right now at securityweekly.com/Barracuda.
Welcome back. Fleming Shi is the CTO of Barracuda Networks. That all sounds cool, and we should have had the Barracuda song from Heart, to play in the background when Fleming was coming on. And he's going to join me today as a guest, and we're going to talk about supply chain and threats and all kinds of stuff. Hi, Fleming.
Hi. Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
Yeah, it's really good to have you here. You've been a guest on a lot of different shows, and so it was really nice to have you on the news. One of the things I was going to talk to you about was, so when I first started programming, so you're going to love this. When I first started programming in 1977, you could sabotage code, and it wasn't very many people's code, but you could sabotage code just by punching a hole in the paper tape with a pencil. I mean, right. that was like a hack in 1977. Yep. And I know you're not that old, but what was the first sort of hacker sort of thing that you saw or you thought of when you first got started in this business?
That's interesting. Actually, I do hear about the punch cards, and the core dump is what actually physical, like you can actually spread spray a whole bunch of your cards on the floor and it becomes a nightmare. Right? Well, I think the ways I look at it, I would just say use my experience with my initial set of tools that I use for computing. I started with VIC-20 from my friend, borrowed it from my friend, connects to the TV. There's nothing really you can hack about it. You can write a program to actually do fun stuff like print a picture of a Christmas tree, for example, right? So I think as time go along, then you can start seeing software being sold as well as being used in various different business functions that is becoming more critical. I think that's when I started to realize hackers can really infect software and find ways to get into the software that's basically potentially could cause harm and obviously benefit them financially in their evil ways, right? So I think to many degrees, when you start creating programs, you're starting to include libraries, you're starting to utilize tools. That's when I start to feel there might be something that could be very suspicious and dangerous that you may not even know, right? So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of thought about this back when there was this complexity that started from we went through this sort of process, and there was this whole thing about the mainframe is dead. And, on the mainframe, it was very controlled. And we had hackers there, too, and some of us were mainframe-type hackers. But then they, basically IBM was telling us mainframes were dead at the same time they were selling us mainframes, and that you would have your very own computer on your desk. Right. And we had users then that were being harassed by really lame malware that was on floppy disks and stuff like that. I mean, I don't know if you've ever seen it for your VIC-20, but I think all of us probably wrote one little piece of code that did there was one that started up and it said cleaning your hard drive, and it made all kinds of whirring noises and stuff. And
exactly.
Yeah, I mean, but that wasn't widespread. And then, we got back to that sort of client server model, which was to me just another mainframe model. And now we're at the cloud, which is a real mainframe model. But today, I think where we are is we see just almost a worldwide mesh of network devices that are all connected together. How do you think that threat surface has evolved for users?
Yeah, I mean, from my experience, I'm glad you touched on IBM, because IBM compatibles, the days that when I was building my own XT, AT compatibles, and then eventually putting, the whole purpose of building those computers back then was to, do some word processing. But most of the time I used it for playing video games, right? So you think about that, when that happened, immediately I wanted to connect to the, not the internet, but basically, dial up sysops, basically where you can download software and stuff like that. So there was exchange sort of underneath already. So that's where the bad stuff can come in, which you could download a piece of software that probably is legit, but it still have potentially hacks in there or things that could damage your computer. But the evolution took I would say, a huge hockey stick, the way how quickly things evolved, because back in the days when you build software, you still have to go get operating system, get the hardware, get your hardware together, and then install the operating system, get your compilers, everything all together, then move, right? Now these days, all these things are actually much easier with public cloud infrastructure. With the software being the way it is today, hardly ever you have to really get down to writing socket level code to communicate with your client, between your client and server type of software kind of behavior. Yeah, there's plenty of libraries that's available to people now, and it's so many things connected together, so many microservices available that you can interact with that to solve your, to actually build your software. In fact, we did a study. I think over 54% of the code base that we examined, it's third-party software libraries, right? Open source or whatever you are using for SDKs and stuff like that. So I think the evolution got into a place where building software is using ready-to-use type of supplies. I would call it libraries and in various different programming languages, both on the server side as well as on the client side. Because software today, I remember the days when I put my first CGI back in, it's CGI not for computer graphics, but more of a computer gateway interface. I don't know if you remember that, .CGIs. Mm-hmm. It was mostly rendering on the server side. Yeah. Then you get the HTML and really kind of show on your browser. But today's world, a lot of that has changed, right? So the server side actually gets the data together. The rendering and the compute to make a really awesome user experience happens on the client side. So if you think about supply chain, it's also shifting because it's no longer just the supply chain of building your software, building your runtime libraries, including your runtime libraries and building your software with static libraries. Now it's also potentially inclusion of JavaScript libraries that runs on the browser, on the client side. So makes security for application much harder, right? Because then the bad guys can figure out ways to infiltrate not only just your build environment or your libraries, but also potentially attack your users that you don't have, you won't be in the data path for, right? So it's getting much harder. So Obviously, it's a problem, but we have to find the best way to protect our customers. Yeah.
Yeah, the president of the United States, wrote an executive order a couple of weeks ago that basically is saying that they have to put an ingredient list, as they're calling it, on software that they want to sell. Do you think that's even doable? I was looking at a piece of software yesterday. I was trying to help somebody, and the number of calls in that piece of software, and it wasn't even that complicated of a thing, that were external calls, was just like, wow. And and I was like, and then I don't even know how that ingredient list would work then, because if I call something else and that calls something else and that calls something else, I don't even know how you chain all that stuff together. Do you think that would actually work? I mean, is it possible?
I think it's going to be difficult, but it's definitely anything is possible, because we get the browser companies and also the server infrastructure and application infrastructure, public cloud. All together, we can solve this. But the biggest challenge is still, if you think about supply chain, there's supply chain that basically, like I mentioned, that get into your CI/CD pipeline, get into your builds, get into disrupting, find a way to get to that. So when you're building software, you're apparently building potentially malware, right? That's one side. The other one is figuring out how everything links. But most of the initial days, I would say, how a website or web application is interconnected is mostly due to advertisements. If you remember trackers, if you remember this, I think I use this, I currently use the tool now. Basically, it's an extension to the browser. It will stop all the trackers, right? Basically, they find a way to get into your client-side code to basically see what the user is behavior is and report back, and all for the purpose of actually commercial purposes. But I think if you think about beyond that, now actually rendering the page, doing, for example, turning turning some data into a three-dimensional vector graphics or anything like that could be a library away from making it happen. So developers are gonna probably lean towards convenience and efficiency by using those libraries, right? And in that effect, I think there's so much that's happening right now. Really, what we have to do is from the JavaScript interpreter on the browser, all the engines that's running the browser need to get better and smarter, right? And of course, on the other type of supply chain attacks, which is completely manageable, we just have to make sure, really monitor what software is being used, and really check and balance, make sure all this, the integrity for those software libraries are constantly being examined, during nightly builds, doing any type of compilation or a software development process. Yeah.
And I mean, and I think the cloud's going to make that even worse, right? I mean, because in some way it goes back to what you were saying earlier about the rendering. We moved rendering onto servers. I mean, I remember building those projects because I was doing some of it for the architecture school, and they were like, how do we render this stuff? And, we built some servers they could send their renders to. Then you pulled it back down. So desktops and the GPUs got better. And now I actually think some of that's going to start getting pushed back the other direction because of the cloud. Because why do I need all that horsepower local if I need to do some kind of render once a month? And if I could, buy that time on whatever service. So I think those threats go up there with lambdas and all these things. It's really scary and intimidating to me when I look at code today because of the sheer volume of things that are going on outside the control of me as the programmer. I mean, do you feel that same way? I mean, when you look at code today, do you get that feeling?
Definitely. I actually look at the developer behavior as one of the things that I worry about the most, because developers are going to be able to utilize public cloud very efficiently. The only problem is it secure, right? Are they doing the right thing in the public cloud infrastructure? Are they configuring everything correctly? For convenience, they could open the port to so they can access, thinking from their home is the only way in. But home networks are not always safe too. You heard the news from TrendMicro, right? So my thinking here is that the behavior in public cloud infrastructure, using in public cloud to build your software, could potentially open up more vulnerabilities to the bad guys. They can take over, they can They can run crypto mining all the way to potentially, doing actual malware or malicious attacks. So I think cloud security posture is one of the things that's available natively in the public cloud infrastructure, as well as tools that's available to make sure the developers and your engineers are utilizing the public cloud infrastructure in a secure manner. Yeah, and still figure out a way to stay building things very fast.
Yep. I think developers are always about getting it to work. I mean, no matter what your intention, at some point you're sitting there going, I've got to fix this. I've got to fix this. I've got to fix this. And that's where you start making those big mistakes, right? Because you go, I'm going to grab this and put it in there. And, it works. that's it. Hit commit.
Yeah.
All
exactly.
right. I want to thank Fleming Shi from CTO Network, or from the CTO Barracuda Networks for joining us today with some great insights about that. If you want to learn more about Barracuda, please visit securityweekly.com/Barracuda. And finally, thank you. And finally, Charlie bit my finger is a meme for the ages. That says a lot about our modern culture. You know, the Renaissance had Michelangelo. We have Charlie bit my finger, from this era. But one of the earliest viral videos, it was a 55-second clip. If you've never seen, I'm surely you've seen it, but if you've never seen it, it's a 55-second clip that shows a small British boy getting bitten by his even smaller British, presumably baby brother. I don't know. Maybe I think they're boys. But anyway, the clip. So this Charlie bit my finger clip was auctioned off on Sunday as an NFT. And an anonymous bidder, get this, plopped down $760,999 for the 55-second clip. Really. So the two kids are now 15 and 17, but I guess they won't need to worry much about college loans since they just got all that money for this 55-second viral video clip way back when. If you don't know what an NFT is, you probably should read up on it, but it basically means that we have put a hash with the clip, and it means it can be pulled from being posted online unless somebody owns it. So I guess it will disappear. I mean, they said it's going to disappear from YouTube. It's going to disappear from the earth as some collector takes it and puts it on their private yacht. I hope they enjoy it over and over and over again on their private island or in space on Mars or wherever it is they have this NFT. And that is the news in a time of declining plague. Get your shots. Thanks to Fleming Shi from Barracuda. See you Friday on Security Weekly News Wrap-Up Show.